Veronica Jones rang me. She was struggling to get connected.
Right. By the time I give the little spiel at the beginning, she might be there.
I don't think so.
No. Okay. Right. Are we live now?
Yep, the live stream's up.
Thank you. Okay, welcome everyone to the Castle Morpeth Area Council meeting this afternoon, which is Wednesday, the 21st of April 2021, not the usual Monday that we normally have. This meeting is being held virtually and is also being live streamed on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/NorthumberlandTV. And to help with the smooth running of this meeting, all members have received a copy of the procedure to be followed in the committee papers. So I would just ask that we all follow that guidance, please. Members are asked to keep microphones on mute unless invited to speak by the chair, and to raise their hand if they do wish to speak. Can members also make sure that they do have their cameras on, if at all possible? Thank you. And can I remind members and officers to switch their mobile phones off during the meeting? In line with the changes to public speaking protocol for virtual meetings, written representations will be read out by an officer at the appropriate point in this meeting. At this point, I'll now ask the legal officer, who was Danielle Haddon, if she will ask each member of the committee just to confirm their presence, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll go through members individually. If you could just unmute, confirm you can hear and you're present, and then place yourself on mute again. Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
I have apologies from Councillor Armstrong. She texted me.
Thank you. Councillor Bourne, I can't see anywhere. Councillor Bainan, again, I can't see on the screen. Councillor Dickinson. Again, can't see on screen. Councillor Dodd.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Dunn.
Yes, present.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Jones. I think Councillor Dodd, you said she was having some connection issues. Councillor Ledger. I also can't see. Councillor Sanderson. Yes, Councillor Sanderson, yeah, thank you. Councillor Towns.
Daniela has apologies from Councillor Towns.
Thank you, Leslie. Councillor Wearmouth.
Yes, thank you, present, having gotten up early to do all my leafleting.
Thank you. Thank you, that's everyone, Chair.
Thank you, Danielle. Can you just confirm the apologies that you've got there? That would be the next normal step.
I've now received apologies from Councillor Armstrong and Councillor Jones if she can't get on, and Councillor Towns.
Thank you. Right, if we move on to item 3 on the agenda, and that's the minutes. Members have received the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on Monday, the 8th of March, and are asked at this point to confirm these as a true record. Will anybody move that that is the case?
Happy to move that.
Now I've got Councillor Dodd and Councillor Wearmouth. Okay, and just a quick show of hands, please. Thank you. Okay, so those minutes are confirmed as a true record of the last meeting. Item 4 on the agenda is to ask for the disclosure of members' interests in any of the agenda items. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. I have an interest in item 720/01768/FUL, as I am actually representing the residents in public speaking today. So I will be withdrawing from that part of the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Anyone else want to declare any interests? No? Okay, so we'll move on to agenda item 5, which is determination of planning applications. And the committee has been asked to determine 3 applications this afternoon. using those powers delegated to the committee as set out in the report on pages 9 till 12.
I'll start with the
Yes,
first applicant, Councillor
sorry, I
Dunn.
lost
Okay.
everybody for a second
Right.
there.
Thank you.
So if we go on
Um,
to the first application, and Judith's going to present that. Thank you, Judith.
Thank you, Chair. Just share my screen. I just confirm everybody can see that. Yeah, okay. So can I first bring to members' attention a small error in paragraph 7.18 of your report. On the third last line, the word "not" has been missed out. So the second part of the sentence should read, on balance, there would not be sufficient grounds to refuse the application on the impact to the residents of the old coach house alone. So the application seeks planning permission for a detached 8-bay garage to be located within the grounds of Espy Hall in Morpeth. There is a smaller double garage detached currently within the grounds, which sits within the northwest corner of the main garden area. This will be demolished and replaced with the proposed detached garage. The proposed garage would be positioned approximately 4.5 metres away from the northern boundary, which is shared with the old coach house, and around 1.5 metres away from the western boundary wall. The measurements of the garage are around 30 metres by 8.3 metres, with a central porch section projecting a further 1.5 metres, equating to a total height in the region of 9.8 metres. The roof would be of a dual pitched design. So this plan here shows the location plan existing as it is now. And this is a closer plan showing Espy Hall, which is here. And this is the detached garage, which will be demolished. This is the area of the northern boundary wall and the western boundary wall. Over here in colour, again, it's the same plan with Espy Hall here. This is the old coach house. This is the detached garage to be demolished, and this is the extent of the proposed garage within the grounds. So looking at the proposed floor plan and front elevation, you can see the floor plan shows the 8 bays proposed. And this is a shot of the front elevation of the garage of how it will appear. The side elevations, both here, and the rear elevation of the proposed garage. And this is a garage visual of what the garage would look like once completed. And this is the detached garage that is due to be demolished. So the site is located within the green belt. Therefore, the proposal needs to be assessed under green belt policy within paragraph 145 of the National Planning Policy Framework. The criteria around green belt is that inappropriate development that will be harmful to the green belt should not be approved unless in very special circumstances. There are some exceptions to what is regarded as inappropriate, which are set out in paragraph 7.6 of your report. It is our view that none of these exceptions are met, and because of that, the consideration then falls to very special circumstances. However, none have been presented to support this case for the detached garage. In that respect, the proposed garage is unacceptable development in the green belt and should be refused. However, there is a permitted development position to be considered also here that members should be aware of. The applicant can build a substantial garage under permitted development rights. Effectively, the 8-bay garage could still be constructed. The difference would be to the roof. I'll just show how that would be. So this is the proposal that we're considering now, and this is what the applicant has submitted, and that is what they want to be built within the grounds. This is the permitted development design, so you can see that the roof is a lot more squat on the permitted development design, but they would still get their 8 bays in. There is a fallback position of which the local planning authority has no control over. It means the applicant, the applicant has recently submitted an application for a certificate of lawful development for the permitted development scheme. This means that should this application currently under consideration be refused, the applicant will be able to go ahead with this scheme here. From a planning perspective, this is still a sizable garage that could accommodate up to 8 cars. Anything greater in scale or massing is considered to be inappropriate development within the greenbelt, creating harm. The applicant submits that the preferred scheme should be considered against the permitted development scheme, and that the appearance of the preferred scheme is more desirable than the permitted development scheme. However, and as I've mentioned, the test is what impact any development that is bigger than what can be achieved under permitted development would have on the greenbelt. And in this case, as the report sets out, that impact is considered to be harmful to the openness of the greenbelt, and without any very special circumstances present, the proposal cannot be supported. A number of objections have been raised, all of which are detailed within your report. I'll just go through some final photographs. This has been taken from just in front of the existing detached garage, looking north towards the old coach house. So that is the old coach house. And these last three just show them from different perspectives from within the grounds of the coach house. So this first one, there is the boundary wall. Now the old coach house does sit slightly higher and more elevated position than Espley Hall because of the topography of the land. You can just see over the boundary wall there, the peak of the existing garage. This photo again is standing closer to the boundary wall, and that shows that detached garage sitting there. So the proposed garage would extend all the way across here and would obviously be higher than what you can see there. And this photograph is taken from further back within the grounds of the old coach house, and you can just see the peak of the garage in the distance behind the trees. That would obviously, again, as I say, that would project in a southern direction lengthwise, but it would obviously sit further up and higher and have a more visual presence than the existing garage at the moment. One final point to mention is any future or other intended use for the garage. The applicant has set out that it is not an intention to change the use of the garage to residential, and is happy to have a condition attached to any permission granted in that regard. However, it's just for members to note that conditions can be appealed to the inspectorate or changed or removed subject to further planning applications. And notwithstanding any of that in relation to future uses, the consideration from members today now is the proposal before us for the 8-bay garage. So going back to this design here. Chair, in considering the planning balance that the proposal conflicts with the Greenbelt policies within the NPPF, and in the absence of any very special circumstances, the application is recommended for refusal for the reason contained within the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Can I just take a step back? I lost my screen for a while before, and I would normally have asked members just to confirm that they have been able to see the videos that were circulated. Yeah, okay. Okay, we do have some public representations on this application, and I'll remind members that there are no questions in relation to written representations. The first one is from an objector, and it will be read by Jeff Horseman.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this is an objection statement in respect of the planning application. We object very strongly against this inappropriate and disproportionately large proposed structure in its current position, design, size and overall mass. It is not merely replacing the current double-sized garage with similar. It is massively increasing the size of footprint, height and mass. It is proposed to be at least 4.5 times larger than the existing footprint and at least 5.5 times larger in volume than the existing garage. It is huge. It is not going to be a domestic garage. It is going to be a car showroom and garaging area for up to 12 vehicles. The plan shows parking for 8 vehicles, and the probability we have heard from the proposer for housing 4 more vehicles on car lifts. This is the main reason why the proposed structure is so high. A lower roof line would not spoil the look of the structure, just reduce the amount of cars stored there. Many other nearby structures have the reduced angled roof. This is also evidenced by the oversized glass-fronted showpiece porch display area, which faces the main residence and will no doubt be illuminated, creating additional light pollution. The existing garage on this site stands at approximately 5 meters high. This is very much more in keeping with the existing buildings of the estate. The proposed structure is far higher, over 6 meters, and this is increased to over 7 meters by the addition of the glass-fronted porch area. Our property is positioned higher than the proposed structure, and therefore it will be in full view from all of our main windows and garden area, giving an unacceptable and detrimental effect on our outlook. The structural proximity and mass will be overbearing. We will be looking onto a solid 8 meter by 6 meter gable end wall and a structure with a length of 30 meters. There is no screening as suggested on the plans or in the report, other than small, mainly deciduous shrubs and ornamental trees. There will be a huge visible impact on our woodland garden to the west of the site, a 30 meter long, over 6 meter high wall and roof, and an unacceptable loss of privacy in an area deemed of high landscape value. The structure is so far away from the main residence that it must be considered a new build rather than an extension. It is far closer to our home and other buildings on the estate than the main property. This needs to be rejected under the development rulings for Greenbelt and open countryside, and for having a significant impact on the openness of the surrounding area and destruction of the unique 1890s estate footprint. The nature and diversity of this area of high landscape value has already been abused with the felling of 3 very large, old, healthy and significant hardwood trees prior to the planning application being submitted. This was done with the knowledge there would be strong objections to their removal. Subsequent reports have advised against any further felling of healthy mature trees in this area. This structure will have a significant impact on the biodiversity of the area and an adverse impact on our property, garden, land and lives. There has been no consideration from the proposer for the area, neighbours or the neighbouring properties. The proposed building is designed and positioned so with a change of use this would make a superb residence in the future. There has on the estate over the years been a number of residential planning applications which have been refused. Passing this application will open the floodgates for planning on a number of sites on the estate that are ripe for development. I own a large amount of land here with development potential. I don't want this to happen. As per acceptable development within the Greenbelt and open countryside, this proposal does not provide the same level of provision as the existing building. It increases it significantly from 2 vehicles to potentially 12, not including the parking area. The increase in vehicle movements, visitors, vehicle maintenance and noise from supercar type vehicles, all within very close proximity to our home, is unacceptable and thoughtless. Finally, we are not against a new garage structure being built, but it must fit in with the estate, the location and be of an appropriate size and design. The present proposed structure is wholly inappropriate and inconsiderate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jeff. There is representation from a supporter of this application, and I believe Ryan is going to read that one for us.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this is support coming from Lichfields. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at today's meeting. Whilst this is a relatively simple planning application for a garage next to a house, we appreciate that there is a degree of complexity due to the site's position within the Greenbelt. However, the key consideration remains simple, which building is preferable, the version that could be built under permitted development rights or the version that is subject of this planning application. It is important that the proposed garage is considered against the permitted development version rather than the existing one, because as the officer report confirms, that could be built without any control from the council. As a result of the recommendation for refusal, a certificate of lawfulness has been submitted to the council to formalise this, and our client has confirmed that reluctantly he would be prepared to build it if it is the only option available. Case law has established that permitted development option represents a robust fallback position and is a significant material consideration. If the permitted development option is not taken into account, it would represent an error in law. The Court of Appeal's judgment in the case of Mansell versus Tonbridge and Malling Borough Council 2017 provides a good example of this. The permitted development version could provide sufficient space to store the cars, but has several weaknesses when compared with the proposed building. It could be built closer to the boundary with the neighbouring boundary than currently proposed. It would be poorly proportioned with a squat appearance, and the council would have no control over the detailed appearance of the building or the materials used. There is a good deal within the officer's report that we agree with. The impact of the proposed building on the neighbouring property would not warrant a reason for refusal. During the course of the application, the building has been moved further away from the boundary and the height has been reduced at the request of officers. There are no objections from the technical consultees, such as Council's Ecology and Highways Department or Hebron Parish Council. The building will simply be used to provide secure storage for a collection of cars and incorporates features specifically for this use. There is no intention to use it for any other purpose. The key issue is whether the appearance of the building is acceptable or not. The proposed garage has been carefully designed to respect the scale and proportions of Espley Hall. The roof pitch mirrors that of the hall and gives the building appropriate proportions relative to its length and width. High quality materials are proposed, and by approving this application, the council could retain control through these planning conditions. Despite concluding that the proposed building would have an acceptable relationship with the neighbouring property, the officer concludes that it will be overbearing. Clearly, that would not be the case, as you can see from the drawings presented today. When compared with the garage that could be built under permitted development rights, the proposed building is far more attractive, better positioned and well designed. A small increase in height between the permitted development version and the application proposal would not be disproportionate. This means that the proposal accords with Part C of paragraph 145 of the NPPF, and very special circumstances would not be needed. We ask that you compare the proposed building with the permitted development option and trust that you will agree that it is far higher quality building in all respects. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, could I just, before I go to members' question, could I just make a point, possibly a correction on the sizes? I think I may have said in my presentation that the overall height of the proposed garage will be 9.8 metres. That's actually the full projection when you include the central porch area. If I could just run by the full dimensions again. The proposed garage would measure 30 metres by 8.3, with the central porch section projecting approximately 1.5 metres to a total approximately 9.8 metres. So that's the overall, the depth that would be at its maximum. And the overall height with the dual pitched roof approximately 6.2 metres at the ridge, reducing to approximately 2.7 metres at the eaves. The porch section of the garage would have a perpendicular dual pitch roof measuring a maximum height of approximately 7.2. So it's just to clarify that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Judith. Before we do move into, sorry.
Chair,
Yeah.
Is it okay if I just come in at this point?
Yeah, can I just ask before you come in, Rob, can I just clarify, I believe Councillor Dickinson came in after the end of the presentation, but before any things were read out. So I'm assuming, Scott, that you'll be...
I've put it in the group chat, Chair, that I'm aware
Thank
that
you.
I can't participate.
Right. That's great, thank you. Okay, Rob, carry on.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, this is an unusual application to come to a planning committee, and I'd like to emphasise that normally it is very much a daily process in the planning department where we make a balance against things like what could be done under permitted development rights and the overall net impact of schemes. In this case, the reason why this has been brought to committee is this is a greenbelt site. We've recently been through a full examination in public on the local plan, which talked about the greenbelt. And the greenbelt sets out a number of tests, remember. and that it is for, one building or, 20 or more, And this isn't just a case of a simple balancing exercise. We have to satisfy ourselves of a legal test, and that is the very special circumstances here. So normally, I'd be discussing with members about that they can place more weight or less weight on different considerations here. However, my advice is that significant importance needs to be attached to the requirement to demonstrate very special circumstances. And on that basis, I would suggest that you put to one side for a moment that this is for a garage and just think of this as a large building in the green belt. Okay, I know this may seem a sort of odd approach, but I think it's a more robust way of looking at this from a green belt perspective rather than just coming to a balance on harm versus benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Right, we can go into members' questions to planning officers. I don't see any. Can I just ask, I know you've made clear how we're assessing this under the green belt policy, etc. And are we comparing this to the existing building as it stands and not the permitted development rights?
Well, yes, and that is how it's been assessed under paragraph 145 of the green belt as a standalone building. And one of the criteria is does ask for. It says it's only acceptable if the extension or alteration of a building, provided that it does not result in disproportionate additions over and above the size of the original building, or the replacement of a building, provided the new building is in the same use and not materially larger. So it's on that latter point that it has been assessed. The applicant is considering it from the permitted development perspective and asking us to consider how much larger the preferred garage would be against the permitted development, the size of the permitted development garage, but we have assessed it in line with green belt policy.
Yeah, and Chair, could I also ask that on one hand, it is to be welcomed that clearly the applicant with its agent has looked at improving the design over theoretically what could be provided under the permitted development scheme. But I would just advise caution on just thinking there is only one permitted development scheme, and there could be the argument that the worst case is being portrayed for a permitted development scheme when there could be other alternative ways of using permitted development rights rather than the one just tabled. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Wearmouth.
Thank you, Chair. So probably a question for Rob, I think. The only way that I would see that this would accord with the NPPF and in terms of green belt and so on, there is something in there about exceptional design. And I take it that you don't feel that that threshold's been met in any way in terms of comparison to the alternative as well, and taking the point that the alternative could be presented in a way that doesn't necessarily look as good as it could do.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor Wearmouth. Yeah, for all members present, I think what Councillor Wearmouth is referring to is there is a provision called paragraph 79 of the policy framework that allows local authorities to support schemes for exceptional architectural merit. It was introduced, a provision introduced in the 1990s. It was called the Gummer Rule, which sort of facilitates the building, if you will, like new stately homes. Okay, there are a number of tests in there, and they relate to contribution to the area, improving the area, etc. And that is a very high bar. And while we do support those sort of applications, we also do refuse them. And this one, for a number of reasons, I don't think would constitute something we would look at from that perspective. Well, thank you, it was a good suggestion.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No. Well, at this point, I would ask if anyone is willing to put forward a proposal. The recommendation is that this application be refused permission. Councillor Dodd.
I'll propose that we agree with the officer and that the application be refused.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Foster. Okay, it has been proposed and seconded that this application be refused in accordance with the officer's report. So we can now go into debate about that. Councillor Wearmouth.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think I'll probably reluctantly agree to support the proposal from Councillor Dodd. I think that probably the alternative that we're looking at probably is more attractive. I'm not totally convinced that it's particularly overbearing or what have you, but we're here to implement policy and the law and so on, and so reluctantly that's the direction that I'll be going in.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay, we can move to the vote. Danielle, could you just read out the recommendation as it stands, please?
Yes, Chair. So it's a recommendation to refuse permission for the reasons set out in your report at page 24 of your papers. And that's the proposed garage, by virtue of its scale and massing, is considered to be inappropriate development within the green belt and the open countryside. The proposal fails to meet any of the exceptions within paragraph 145 of the NPPF, and no very special circumstances have been demonstrated. As such, the proposal does not comply with policies C1, C16 and C17 of the Castle Morpeth District Local Plan, policies SET1 and DES1 of the Morpeth Neighbourhood Plan, and paragraph 145 of the NPPF.
Thank you, Danielle.
To proceed to the vote.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so if I just call each member, if you could let me know if you're for, against or abstaining, please. Councillor Dodd.
For.
Councillor Dunn.
For.
Councillor Foster.
For.
Councillor Jackson.
For.
Councillor Sanderson.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Wearmouth.
For.
Thank you. That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you, Danielle. Okay, that is unanimous, and therefore it is resolved that this application be refused permission. Thank you. We move on to agenda item 7, and that is application number 20-01768 FUL, and this is change of use vehicle depot to material recycling facility, and it's Watson's Yard, Barrington Road, Bedlington. And Ryan is the officer who's going to present this. Can I just ask members if they have all managed to see the site videos? Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ryan.
Yep, thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen there. Right. Yeah, so just as an update to members, one further objection was received against the application following publication of the officer report. This objection reads, I strongly object to the planning application due to increased noise, pollution and heavy traffic in the local area. So moving on to the presentation, this application seeks planning permission for the change of use of a vehicle depot to a material recycling facility at Watson's Yard, Barrington Road, Bedlington. The application building is located within the Barrington Industrial Estate and is currently vacant, previously being occupied by RoadSafe for the storage and maintenance of their vehicles. Existing units bound the site to the north and south, with existing residential properties located to the east, albeit beyond sort of the existing railway line. The proposed site plan shows the intended site layout and access arrangement. There are no external changes proposed to the existing building to facilitate the change of use. And these site photographs show the site as existing. Boundary treatments and soft landscaping assist in screening the building and the wider site from various viewpoints within the industrial estate. The application is recommended for approval subject to appropriate conditions which would ensure the protection of residential amenity and highway safety. That's all, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. We do have some public written representations on this application, and the first one is objecting, and it will be read by Jeff Horseman.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So, a representation of objection. Residents would like to emphasise the overwhelming level of opposition to this proposal, with 71 formal objections registered. We hope to reach out to the committee to explain the impact of this proposal on our quality of life. Whilst the area is classed as industrial land, this site, 50 metres from residential properties, has historically been commercial use. This proposed change of use to a recycling centre will have lasting negative impacts on the lives of residents, many of whom have bought houses for the outdoor garden space to enjoy outdoor living, supporting health and well-being, just crucial in the current climate. The Northumberland Waste Local Plan Policy EP2 states, proposals for waste development will only be permitted where surrounding land uses can be adequately safeguarded from unacceptable noise, dust, odour, visual impact, traffic or other loss of amenity. Policy S3 states planning permission for waste management facilities will not be granted where there would be a significant adverse effect on local communities and the environment. This proposal doesn't meet these policies and will have an extremely adverse effect on residential amenity. Northumberland Local Plan Policy WAS2 Part E states, approval only if the proposal would not result in unacceptable adverse effects on the natural or historic environment, sensitive receptors, residential amenity as a result of noise, dust, lighting, vibration, odour, vermin, birds, litter, visual intrusion. Again, Northumberland Local Plan Policy WAS2 Part B requires the facility is fully contained within buildings or enclosed structures unless it can be demonstrated that any unacceptable adverse environmental effects can be effectively mitigated and or it is a facility that genuinely requires an outdoor location. However, storage from this site is to be outdoors in storage bays. We strongly contest any mitigation put forward for the proposal to be approved and refute claims that pollution in terms of noise, dust and vibration would be at an acceptable level. Wansbeck District Local Plan Policy GP25 states at paragraph 3.77 of the plan that the policy seeks to protect people from the adverse impact of noise arising from new developments in an area. The knowledge is that this is not a short-term proposal and the proposal will subject residents to ongoing noise from 8 AM to 6 PM, causing significant harm and distress when residents are unable to enjoy their outdoor indoor areas in the summer when doors and windows are open. Further observations reference here to a front-loading shovel operating 30 minutes per hour, tipping rubble into a metal shed, a trommel operating for a further 30 minutes per hour, once again vibrating inside a metal shed, a front-loading shovel outside of the building 10 minutes per hour, loading of materials 10 minutes per hour and 10 outgoing skips per day. This equates to heavy industrial vehicles and machinery continually in operation for 10 hours per day, 6 days a week within 50 metres of properties. We cannot emphasise strongly enough how the noise and vibration will severely impact a large proportion of the surrounding residential area. Wansbeck Local Plan Policy GP26 states at paragraph 3.8 of the plan, a number of measures may be introduced to limit disturbance from noise from external sources. We feel the planning officer believes mitigating measures have been met. However, if an adequate level of protection against an existing noise source cannot be ensured, it will normally be appropriate for planning permission to be refused. Residents do not believe that the protection from the noise can be ensured. Highway and safety implications are a concern to residents in relation to the additional heavy traffic and the impact on noise and safety. Again, in terms of Northumberland local plan, paragraph 13.61 states smaller sites could be considered if the transport network is adequate to accommodate the proposed import and export of material from the site. Barrington Road is not adequate. There continues to be carriageway problems on this site which have not been adequately addressed. This site is on the border of the parish, ward and local area council area. Members, please note there is another proposal 21/1106/CCD being discussed in a different local area council on the other side of the same street to remove a piece of protected open space to replace with a car park for the upcoming train line. This in turn will have an environmental impact on residents. This leaves residents in this area at a significant disadvantage at both sides of the street with both noise and pollution. Policy WAS2F states the proposal would only be permitted if it would not give rise to unacceptable adverse cumulative effects. The joined up thinking required on special strategy policies has failed to consider this and will fail local residents. Although the planning officer has recommended approval, we beg the committee to use their powers and reject this blight on our lives. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jeff. And if I can bring in Councillor Foster now, who's the elected member and wishes to speak on this application.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I've been asked to speak against this change of use application by many local residents who fear there will be an adverse effect on their quality of life and health and well-being. A couple of years ago, I represented a number of residents at a planning committee who were unhappy with the noise and dust levels from another recycling site located close by on the Barrington Industrial Estate. These residents live fairly close to that site and suffered noise and dust issues. But with this application, many residents live a lot closer to the proposed site and therefore anticipate that the noise and dust levels will be worse again. The existing site had planning conditions to mitigate the dust and noise issues, but clearly the mitigation is not sufficient as residents continue to suffer noise and dust pollution. So there are no guarantees that this site will be any different, even with the recommended planning conditions. This application is detrimental to residential amenity. Residents are worried that they will no longer be able to enjoy their outdoor recreation time at their own homes due to the impact of the noise pollution coming from the site. In the warmer months, there will be further noise pollution as residents open their windows for ventilation and to help cool their homes. Dust pollution from the existing site is already evident on the cars and windows of many properties, with dust also affecting the inside of their homes. This can only be added to with the establishment of an additional recycling site very close to the existing facility. So the cumulative effect of dust and noise from two recycling sites on the same industrial estate will most certainly have the potential to affect the health and well-being of those who live in the area. Paragraph 7.15 of the report states that the closest residential property is approximately 50 metres from the site. The edge of the application site is approximately only around 20 metres away from the gardens of some of these properties, according to the as the crow fly measurement using Google Earth. In fact, one actual property is only just over 40 metres away from the boundary of the application site. There is also a food establishment very close to the application site, Barrington's Breakfast, Brunch and Lunch. And there is a primary school in the area which could potentially be affected, especially on those windier days. There will be a clear intensification of activity at the application site, resulting in increased noise levels for 10 hours a day each weekday and 5 hours on a Saturday. And whilst it is acknowledged that this is designated as general employment land, any activities on this land should not adversely affect the residential amenity of the surrounding residents. As some gardens are literally just around 20 metres away, it is clear residents will be adversely affected and that this site is not suitable for this particular change of use. Whilst residents would welcome additional employment to the area, this application would create very few jobs at the expense of residential amenity. There is also the question of the need for another recycling site so close to a much larger recycling operation. And there is also currently a planning application in around the Northumberland line for Bedlington Station with parking proposed close to this site. The potential dust pollution may impact on commuters using the parking facility, leading them to park in residential streets, further impacting local residents. I urge you to listen to the valid concerns of these residents and to refuse planning permission for this change of use application today, please. Thank you very much for your time. And Chair, I will withdraw from the meeting now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Foster. There is representation from a supporter of the scheme, and Leslie Little will be reading that out for us.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for listening to this statement. The application site is located on an established industrial estate in Bedlington and it is currently vacant. Road Safe, the previous occupiers, vacated the building about 2 years ago. Local and national planning policies support this building's reuse as a material recycling facility, and this will support Watson's of Bedlington's existing business. At the present time, Kevin Watson operates a skip hire business from this yard. The empty skips are stored there. He has previously taken any waste collected in the skips to the nearby recycling facility, Remondis, on the Barrington Road. Remondis is no longer accepting third-party skip waste, so Mr Watson is now taking the skip waste to Ellington Road landfill. However, as there is no recycling at Ellington Road, so all the waste is going to landfill. This is not in accordance with the waste hierarchy and it increases greenhouse gas emissions due to the additional road mileage the skip wagons need to travel. Mr Watson would therefore like to be able to sort the waste collected in his skips at his own facility, therefore reducing waste miles, recycling the skip waste and supporting his business. It is fully appreciated that there are a number of residential properties to the rear of the site, and we have discussed the proposed operations in detail with the public protection officers at Northumberland County Council. The operations at the site will also require an Environment Agency permit, which will set out exactly how the site must be operated to ensure it doesn't impact on the surrounding area. The imported waste material, which will be predominantly construction demolition and excavation, will be tipped and recycled inside the building. This is a requirement of the permit and this planning application. It is proposed to improve the building by erecting a concrete wall as an inside skin, and this was explained to the parish councillors when we met them on site in the summer of last year. This concrete wall will ensure that there is no noise impact from the operations on the adjacent residential properties. The concrete, rubble, stones and timber, which are separated from the waste, will be stored in the existing aggregate bays in the yard, and, if necessary, the stockpiles and yard can be dampened down with water to prevent dust blowing up from these areas. We would also point out that there is already sand and gravels stored in these bays, and this operation hasn't resulted in dust complaints. We are very aware that there are other users on this estate, and this includes the football factory. For this reason, the application proposes to alter the access arrangements within the industrial estate to ensure the football factory has its own vehicular and pedestrian entrance to the site. We also know that there are concerns in relation to the use of Barrington Road, and we have looked at this carefully with the traffic consultant and agreed planning conditions limiting the number of vehicles leaving the site and for the submission of a route management plan to ensure that highway safety is not compromised. Overall, it is appreciated that local residents will have concerns about the facility and particularly the impact that it may have on their properties. However, the planning conditions and the environmental agency permit will ensure that it is operated with no adverse impact on the surrounding area. Finally, we would like to stress that the application site is on an industrial estate with 2 concrete batching plants to either side of it, one operated by CMAX and the other by Breedon's and the Northumberland line to the rear. So there are already industrial type uses in this area, and it is in a location where you would expect to find such a recycling facility. There are no objections from the statutory consultees, and your local plan policies would support this application. We hope that you will support the officer recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Leslie. Well, that concludes the representations on this application, so we can go straight into committee members' questions to planning officers. Councillor Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think the main issue for me is the dust issue, dust and pollution. And I take it from those representations that quite a lot of the materials that are going to be stored in the outdoor bays are sort of materials including lime and cement, which are notorious for blowing around and causing dust for quite a number of meters in the surrounding area. So the question is how is the planning conditions, how are the planning conditions going to mitigate that potential adverse impact? And that's my main concern.
Yeah. Chair, can I answer that question if that's okay?
Certainly.
Yeah. Thank you for the question, Councillor Jackson. And I think that actually gets to the heart of the issue, in that waste management facilities are regarded as acceptable uses on industrial and commercial sites, with the proviso, and this is run through government guidance for many years, is that modern, well-managed facilities can be accommodated on sites like this. And so that is about the adverse impacts, and that's what lots of the policies that were mentioned talk about. And then there is the issue of dust, noise, vibration on that. The planning conditions set out on issues like noise are robust conditions, and in addition, the day-to-day activities of the site is also covered, unusually, because this is a waste management site, by a dual control issue from the Environment Agency as well, who have operational controls on the site by virtue of the permit. And this requires an environmental management system which sets out how the company will address issues like noise, dust, etc. Dust control is typically controlled by doing the most dusty activities inside the building, and when material is stored outside, to do dampening down, etc. And the Environment Agency will be there to do checks on this is taking place. So what this gives you, I suggest, is a range of controls over the site, which enables you to answer that question: is are there going to be adverse impacts? And from the perspective of the consultees and the evaluation of this scheme, what is tabled, I would argue, clearly falls within the position that we consider it to be acceptable in terms of those adverse impacts. So the policies that were cited do not kick in this case. Okay, I would add that this type of facility is generally an unwelcome one in terms of waste management, does get put into the problem box. However, I'd ask members to consider that this is an industrial estate, and there are a wide range of industrial type activities which could cause noise, dust, etc. problems. Well, this is a waste management scheme, and will have dual controls on it. There will actually be more controls over this site than there would be for a conventional industrial operation. So on that basis, I'm satisfied, Councillor Jackson, that the conditions do enable us to control the activities on the site, and with the backup of the Environment Agency also being the responsible authority for looking after impact issues. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. Have I any other questions? Councillor Dodd? And then I have Councillor Dickinson.
Not that familiar with the site, but how new are the houses next to the site? Because often, what came first, the chicken or the egg, or the pub or the house next door that complains? I'm not familiar. Is this a case of where we've built a lot of new houses and it's suddenly, I see someone shaking their head. I'm not familiar, so I'm just asking, because it is obviously an industrial stroke site, and if we can't do industrial on industrial sites, where do we go?
Just in terms of the houses, they're certainly not sort of new build development. It's within sort of the existing settlement of Bedlington Station. I'm not entirely sure when the properties were built, but they've been there sort of an extensive sort of period of time, as far as I'm aware.
Could I suggest another way of looking at this, Councillor Dodd, in that this site is allocated for employment uses that we call, which we call sites like this now, and that from a policy perspective, additional controls or restrictions haven't been placed on this industrial estate to anticipate any particular problems to do with the proximity of residential properties to it. And as the case officer said, there is actually a railway line next to the site as well. And so on that basis, you have to say, you have to ask yourself, I think the point is that you think about the range and types of activities that occur on industrial estates up and down the county, and then would this scheme cause an adverse impact on those residential properties? And the question is, a wide range of activities could take place on this site, and the impacts are controlled by robust conditions on this.
Thank you. Councillor Dickinson.
Yeah, it's just a quick one really around, so what we deem to be, and I'll obviously bring this bit up in the debate, what we deem to be acceptable to the local population in terms of disruption, dust, health implication, whatever. I'm just wondering, on the items that Rob's covered and appears to be very confident with, what kind of monitoring on a scale would it be? Would it be monitored quarterly, monthly, annually? How often would it be monitored by the Environment Agency to make sure that not only the company's compliance, but the residents' quality of air and all the other things that they've raised around, and Councillor Jackson raised around some of the materials that will be situated there? How often would reassurance and those types of checks take place?
Okay. What we've put in place, Councillor Dickinson, is a condition which limits noise measured at noise-sensitive properties to be no more than 5 decibels higher than background, and that's a fairly tight limit. We impose conditions and then we react to them if they're a problem. However, the Environment Agency requires active management of the site, and the Environment Agency do both announced and unannounced visit. And they have the ability, because they have a provision called the continuous improvement provision in waste permits, where they can go back and, unlike a planning permission, they can vary the conditions attached to it and require new systems of working if the conditions aren't working properly from their side of it. So I would suggest that, being as this is a belt and braces approach, and the opportunity here is to attach conditions over the entire site as well. So the conditions cover all activities on the site, and they are in line with modern practice. And so Public Protection have looked at this through a number of perspectives in terms of experience and current, examples used at other sites. And so this will be a fully modern set of condition reflecting current best practice.
So Chair, if I can just,
Yep.
sorry, because I did ask specifically around intervals of monitoring from the Environment Agency. You know, is it regular that they would quarterly, annually? How often would they do it? Because presumably we respond to enforcement and various other things on complaint, but they have a role presumably.
Yeah, well, yeah. I can just add to that. Yeah, I can understand where you're coming from now, perhaps more clearly. Yeah, unlike a planning application, where you pay a fee and that application is determined. With the Environment Agency permit, you pay an annual maintenance fee to hold that permit, and you get visits, and you get unannounced visits to check compliance on that. And the Environment Agency have a structured programme of reviewing sites that they are permitted. I don't know to what extent, right? But if the Environment Agency were here, because I've heard them say this before, but I don't put words in their mouth. What they say is that they have an inspection programme which they tailor to how they designate sites in terms of whether they are problems or not. In other words, if they get lots of complaints about a site, they will step up the inspection cycle on it and require more work from the operator. Clearly, if an operator runs for several years and there are no problems coming from the site, the Environment Agency would typically do an annual visit to the site.
Thanks. I do notice that Alexander Wall has switched his camera on. Do you want to add anything else to that, Alexander?
Yes, please, Chair. So
could you just make it clear who you are?
Oh yes, so I'm part of the public protection team. So just notice those are the sort of issues that I looked at for this application. So the environment, I just wanted to point out the Environment Agency's regulatory timetable is January to December. So each annual year they'll look at which sites they permit and see what's appropriate in terms of proactive inspection.
Thank you. Councillor Dickinson, did that answer all your questions? Yeah. Can I just ask, I mean, there's been mention of the existing plant that's on there. Is that subject to the environmental, to the live permit?
Yeah, I don't know the vintage of that plant and to what extent it's working under like historical planning permissions, etc. Just to be clear that as a new site, even though some of the activities are taking place already, this will be covered by a new set of controls. In the same way, it is not unusual to find long-standing industrial occupiers on sites not covered by any planning conditions because they predate the planning system being there.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Right, if there are no further questions, we're ready now for a proposal. The recommendation is that this application be granted permission. Anyone willing to put forward a proposal? Councillor Dodd.
I'll propose the recommendation.
Right, and we would need a seconder for that.
Yeah.
Councillor Sanderson. Okay, so it has been proposed and seconded that this application be granted permission as per the report. Okay, we can now go into debate. Councillor Dickinson.
Yeah, I can't support the granting of this application, Chair. I'm not sufficiently comfortable that the issues we raise about the impact on the local community are sufficient. I get that the site is a historic and has been an industrial site for a period of time. I get all of that. This is a very different type of industrial plant within that really would change the dynamic. And listening to the local member, clearly there are a lot of anxieties from local people, which I understand. And, you know, on a planning grounds, we have to take into account the planning rules and policies and all those other things. I'm just not entirely comfortable that it fits within the policies around acceptable impact on local people, and I think that's a thing that, you know, for a member to judge on their own. For me, it doesn't sit comfortably that there isn't such a negative impact that I could confidently, especially with the materials and the types of things that we have or that will be processed at that site, we know cause issue in terms of dust and all the other things and particles in there, and all the things that we've had research on various other sites, which have been raised by other members as well. So I just can't support that proposal, and that's just my position. I'm sure members will have alternative positions, but that's mine. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Anyone else? No. Councillor Dickinson, do you want to come back in? Your hand's still raised. No.
Oh, it's a legacy hand. Apologies.
That's fine. Well, if I can come in myself, I mean, I have great problems with this. It doesn't sit really comfortable with me either. I'm really concerned about how close these properties are to this, and the fact that there's already a facility that is getting quite a few complaints. So, yeah. Councillor Dodd.
As the proposer, I'm allowed to come back and say anything.
Well, I would normally come back to you at the end to wind up.
You didn't last time, but that didn't.
I know I didn't.
I think, you know, we've laid out as a council that we want to recycle, we want to become a greener county. I know that we're in an election process here, but we still have plans in front of us. It wouldn't probably be down as a recommendation to grant if we weren't going to gain, you know, if it went to appeal, we would lose. So I don't shirk any of my responsibility. That hard decisions sometimes have to be made. And this has been here a long time, I'm told, and the industrial bit. So if we can't recycle on our industrial land, we've got a real problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dodd. I mean, if no one else wants to come in on this, we'll just take that as the proposer winding up. Councillor Dickinson.
I don't want to get into a debate with Councillor Dodd, of course, but what I'm trying to say on this particular application, there are lots of industrial sites around the county that would far better absorb this type of recycling. This one's very, very close to residential properties. Others, we don't have that issue, and it's about the appropriateness of where these places are placed. So I don't think anyone's against anything in terms of how or what we put in industrial places, but it's about what's classed as acceptable. And it's what Rob referred to before as planning have advised us that they deem this to be acceptable. Well, based on what the residents have said and based on what I feel, based on all the information that's in that pack, I would want further reassurances before I felt comfortable that a site like this on what is a traditional industrial site was appropriate. And just to reiterate those points, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Councillor Wearmouth.
Thank you, Chair. I just wonder if there's anything that we could. I do share some of these concerns. I wonder if there's, but wonder what data we could additionally receive that might give us some reassurance in the event that we were to defer to a second meeting.
Yeah, Chair, could I possibly come in here?
Yeah.
Okay. Just to try and position this, okay, and tackle the points, but I'm going to lead on to the point which answers what Richard has just said. Okay. The starting point is that employment sites like this are suitable for modern, well-managed waste management facilities. Okay, we have the potential as by the local plan to actually say that business park actually we want to keep for non-waste users because we want to attract like the headquarters of like Microsoft to it, and that's our premium end business park. So we're going to rule out waste users on that one. We have not taken the step to rule out waste users on this business park because it is already occupied by heavy users like cement batching plants, etc. Okay. With that in mind, I do sense though that being as nowadays we deal with perhaps fewer waste management applications than we did at the peak of the waste management changeover from landfilling to active management, which was in the late 90s and early 2000s. So maybe what this requires is that this site will have an environmental management plan with it, and the Environment Agency will use that, to do their improvement work and to monitor the site. Maybe what we could do is we could defer this item and get the applicant to come back with a environmental management plan for the site, showing in black and white how they will deal with issues, how they will deal with complaints if they arise, and what they will do on things like, say, like if it's a windy day, they may need to do, say, sheeting of open air stockpiles and dampening down, etc. We could come back on that basis. Okay.
Thank you. I have Councillor Wearmouth wanting to come in, and then Councillor Dickinson.
And thank you, Rob. I think that would be really useful. And I do wonder, and I take advice from officers or anyone else who knows, as we get a little bit further on from COVID restrictions and hopefully lifting, it might be the case that a planning committee might be able to go and actually visit the site, because I think that would be really valuable in this instance. No matter what we see on the videos, and they are great and officers do a fantastic job, I recognise the proximity of these houses where they are, also what's in between them and the site, and it is a complicated site. I think it would be valuable if practical.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Dickinson, and then Councillor Jackson.
Good Lord, I think for the first time third time in a year, I'm going to agree with Councillor Wearmouth. There is something about the ability to go and see this site, to demonstrate the proximity of the properties, but also understand the workings of the other sites on that unit. What I would also say is that Rob's offer of additional information is welcomed and may provide some reassurance, and we constantly refer to well-managed management plans, etc. You would have expected, or I would have expected, to have that level of detail with this, so that I could have, anticipated what those answers would be for that type of thing. So that lack of information, I suppose, and maybe it's because it needs to come to this stage and then go back, because sometimes things are quite straightforward and management plan being in place is enough written there for us to feel assured. But when it involves the proximity of the properties and the level of feeling from residents and the inability to go and visit and all the other things that we're trying to do around things like this, I think that additional information is definitely, or would be definitely welcomed by me, which would provide potentially some reassurance, and presumably it's not going to impact the company or the opportunity that this may well become at the end by deferring for a short period.
Yeah, Chair, can I just come in very quickly on one point?
Yes.
So I'll let Councillor Jackson come in first, because to answer his question as well.
Yeah, I was, I think a lot of us are feeling this similar things. There's two issues. There is actually seeing the site on the ground, which I think will make a big difference. And secondly, the information about the management plan, especially the dust management plan, and possibly some sort of either presentation or sort of written report from the Environment Agency. So I'm happy to propose an amendment, and that is that this application is deferred for a site visit in the future and for further information on the environmental management aspect.
Yeah, Chair, can I just come in here? Normally, I wouldn't be actively advocating this approach, and I would suggest that members need to judge what's in front of them on merits. However, I think there is a wider issue here, and going back to my point that we are not dealing with many waste management applications at the moment. However, with the drive for climate change, things like more inert waste recycling facilities are really important, because inert waste is a heavy, low value item that doesn't travel very well. So you do need a good network of waste management facilities to deal with and recycle it and drive it up that waste hierarchy. So maybe it is worth deferring this one, because in the future then, if we were to come back with another application on another site, and we were to tell the committee that actually, yes, this is going to use a management plan that you've seen elsewhere, that approach, and that you would have built up an understanding then of how this works on the site and the levels of controls that are available to us. So we can use it as a development opportunity for members to get to grips with the urgency of this issue in terms of sustainable waste management. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Councillor Dickinson still has a hand up. No, he hasn't. Right, Councillor Dodd.
Yeah, considering what we've just heard, I'm quite prepared, as long as Councillor Sanderson is prepared to withdraw the the recommendation
First proposal.
Yeah, in favour of ticking all the boxes, getting all the ducks lined up, and having a look at this. I said at the start I wasn't familiar. And have a site visit early into the new year. I just hope Councillor Dickinson's around to attend it.
Of course I will be, especially if you're going to be there.
Right. Okay, can I go to Councillor Sanderson and ask if he is okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Councillor Dodd and Councillor Sanderson are quite happy to withdraw that initial proposal. And the proposal now is that this is deferred for a site visit and further data being collected and presented to this committee. Do we have a seconder for that, please?
I'll second that, Chair.
That's Councillor Dickinson. And proposed, sorry, it was proposed by Councillor Jackson, yeah? Okay. I can bring Danielle in at this point.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just want to confirm that. So that's a motion to defer the application to carry out a site visit. Is that if applicable given COVID, or just clarify that point?
Sorry, I didn't catch that last bit, Danielle.
Sorry, I know we've mentioned a site visit, but there was a mention of kind of subject to COVID regulations. Do you want that recorded as well?
I think, yeah, that's
okay.
wise.
Danielle can say to organise a site visit as soon as practically possible, I think is probably.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob. Okay, so to just defer the application to carry out a site visit as soon as reasonably practical, and for the request of, was it an environment management plan to be submitted to the committee? Is everyone happy with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, if I can just ask members if they're going to vote for, against or abstaining for that motion. Councillor Dickinson.
For.
Councillor Dodd.
For.
Councillor Dunn.
For.
Councillor Jackson.
For.
Councillor Sanderson.
For.
And Councillor Wearmouth.
Delighted to agree with Councillor Jackson and Councillor Dickinson. For.
Thank you. That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you, Danielle. Okay, that is unanimous. So it's resolved that this application is deferred for the reasons that we've just mentioned. Thank you very much. If we move on to the next item on the agenda, and this is application 20-03389 FUL. And we'll welcome Councillor Foster back into the room. And this is proposed residential development of 4 dwellings as per an amended application on the 21st of December 2020. And it's the land south of Centurion Way, heading on the wall. And I've got Richard Lawton who will present this. And can I just confirm that everyone has been able to access the site video? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just before I start, there is an update. On reflection, it's been requested by the Highways team to remove condition 6 and replace this with a condition for the applicant to provide further details on parking to ensure that cars can safely manoeuvre within the site. So this condition will read as follows. The development shall not commence until details of the car parking area have been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority and implemented in accordance with the approved details. Thereafter, the car parking area shall be retained in accordance with the approved details. Okay, just to start the presentation. The application is seeking planning permission for the proposed residential development of 4 dwellings at Centurion Way, Heading on the Wall. The site is an area of undeveloped land on the southern boundary of Heading and lies within the defined settlement boundary within the Castle Morpeth local plan. The site is in a sustainable location within walking distance of a range of facilities and services. Centurion Way is a residential street that links to Heading Bank to the west and Station Road to the east. The street mainly comprises of 70 detached houses, and other detached properties are adjacent to the development site. The site is a gap in between a line of properties and therefore is an infill plot within the village, and there are buildings surrounding the site to the northwest and east. The site is also an embankment with elevated views of the valley looking towards the River Tyne to the south. The detached properties would be positioned in a linear formation with the access and frontage facing Centurion Way and the rear elevations facing south. The existing hedgerow will be retained on the northern and southern boundaries, but with the exception of gaining access into the site. There will be a single garage for each property with on-site parking provided. There is a permission for the construction of a large agricultural barn directly adjacent to the southern boundary of the application site, which was granted under prior approval in 2020 last year. This permission allows a large barn measuring 75 metres by 10 metres up to a height of 9 metres. The removal of this permission for the barn is being secured under this application via a Section 106 agreement between the applicant and the landowner, and will be legally bound to any approval granted. The detached properties would comprise of 5 bedrooms, and the design adapts to the sloping and land descending to the south from the street level, with the appearance of a bungalow from Centurion Way and 2 stories of space to the rear, incorporating a modern glazed elevation. The side elevations do highlight the low single story height, which is approximately 4.5 metres to the ridge from the street level. Proposed floor plans show the bedrooms are first floor from the street level, with a double height void to the rear. The ground floor will have the living and kitchen area with 2 additional bedrooms. These 3D visuals provide a clear indication of how the development will look from Centurion Way and is set back from the roadside. This is taken from an elevated position, showing the buildings will be sympathetic in terms of their scale, design and use of buff brick. And the same view shows the development context with the extant permission for the barn, which forms a material planning consideration in the overall planning balance. In this instance, should the current allocation for housing be refused, the barn can be built in close proximity to the proposed site, which would offer greater visual impacts and restricting views. The rear elevation is a more modern appearance with the use of glass walls, and the use of buff brick and grey roof tiles is consistent throughout. The proposal aims to provide an overall design that is sympathetic to local character on Centurion Way, but also not discouraging high quality design. This photo is taken from the northwest corner of the site from Centurion Way. It highlights the undeveloped nature of the site and the views beyond. Again, additional view from the same position, but in context with the housing on Centurion Way. Sorry, let's go back. Yes, that's in context, the same view in context with the housing, with the development site opposite the road. This will be approximately 23 metres between existing housing and the main body of the new housing. These photos are taken from the other end of Centurion Way to the east, looking west towards the site. The scheme would obstruct current views to the south from Centurion Way, although the design has offset this impact with a single story height to appear less overbearing. The separation distances between the proposed and existing primary elevations do exceed 20 metres, which will satisfy the requirements of the local plan in terms of privacy and loss of light. This photo is taken from Centurion Way looking south towards the site and the views of the valley beyond. As highlighted in the report, there is no right to a view in planning, and this issue is as a material consideration is not a material consideration. Whilst the development will impact the open aspect of this section of Centurion Way, the site itself is not an area of protected open space, and the character of the area is also residential. Policy C3 in the local plan and HWC2 of the local plan does restrict development in and adjacent to the area of high landscape value, which in this instance is the vast area lying south of the site. The current overall policy approach nationally, however, is not to designate areas of high landscape value, but rather to assess the landscape and visual impacts of proposals against local landscape character. So the Council's Northumberland Landscape Character Assessment identifies the key characteristics of this landscape as glacial trough valley sides that consists of clusters of settlements and frequent developments of new housing. So in terms of the development guidelines, it refers to the need to ensure that the new build development doesn't alter the character, scale or form of existing settlements and creates good settlement boundaries that doesn't result in encroaching into the upper side valleys. So in this case, the development is within the confines of the existing settlement boundaries, sits alongside existing built development on an infill plot, and has a southern edge that is softened by planting. The development would not encroach into the upper valley or alter the character of the existing settlement. I've just got some examples as well, just to say there's no distinctive vernacular within the village of Heddon. The images here highlight other existing properties on the southern boundary of Heddon, mainly to the west of Heddon and the very far corner to the east. Just shows a different array of designs, amounts of glazing, unique styles and use of materials. The bottom plan drawing in particular is a permission approved in 2018 to the southwest corner of the village, which comprises a modern design with balconies, cladding and walls of glazing. This just demonstrates that the proposed development would not add a new incongruent feature in the village, as there's already a mixture of visible development from long-range views from the south. Now, this is one of the long-range views from the south, showing the site and a section of the southern boundary of Centurion Way. The development site would be screened by the existing hedgerow, but also seen in context with the other development, the other detached properties of varying styles. And this is the same view, but the photograph further demonstrates the greater impacts from the consented bond should it be constructed. So to conclude, the application is recommended for approval given the scheme is an infill plot within a sustainable location, whilst the development will restrict views of existing properties on Centurion where the dwellings have been designed to a single-storey height on Centurion itself and to a sympathetic style. There will also be no impact to the landscape character or the existing build-up area. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. We have some written representations for this application, and the objectors' representation will be read by Leslie.
Chair. This is from Mrs. Lorraine Twizzle. These are tough times of isolation and winter. The consultation exercise may not have reached all who live elsewhere in the village or walk through the area in summer. The Parish Council have also raised concern for those not computer literate being able to view and comment online. Despite this, there are still a very significant number of objections and petition signatories, significantly higher numbers than those who received consultation letters to their home. The impact of the development is felt much wider in the community and warranted a much wider direct mail consultation. I would like to address some of the red herrings and smoke screens cited by the developer as justification. 1. An agricultural barn has a prior approval agreement. A prior approval is not a full planning consent by the council. It is a permitted development right given by central government, in this case specifically agricultural. 2. There is no specific character of uniformity to the village. A gross misunderstanding. The village has developed down the hill, sympathetic to the special character of the area and the high landscape value and other properties. 3. The amended scheme is sympathetic to the consultation. A common tactic by developers is to submit an oversized scheme, then pretend to reduce it. 4. Views are not relevant to planning. No individual has a right to a view. A misunderstanding of the collective community. The people are not planning consultants. It is not easy to articulate in planning terminology. People object because they feel very strongly about the special character of the area, the high landscape value, and the loss of amenity for the whole community. I ask that the detail and planning policies referred to in the objection by the Parish Council be very carefully considered. This application is contrary to the National Planning Policy Framework and Policy HWC2, Policy C3 and Policy H15 of the Castle Morpeth District Local Plan. The site is bound to the south by an area of high landscape value. The site location is on the edge of the settlement boundary, is of special character and significance to the whole village, all residents and visitors. The National Planning Policy Framework states that planning decisions should ensure that developments, amongst other things, are sympathetic to local character and history, including the surrounding built environment and landscaping setting. And permission should be refused for development of poor design that fails to take the opportunities available for improving the character and quality of an area and the way it functions. Policy HWC2 states that the Council will refuse development which will have a detrimental effect on the landscape adjacent to or in the vicinity of the Tyne Valley as defined on the proposals map and proposal map inset number 10. With saved policy C3 outlining those areas of high landscape value where development would not be permitted if found to have a detrimental effect. Saved policy H15 of the Castle Morpeth District Local Plan. The proposal will not, quote, be compatible with any distinctive vernacular character present in the locality in respect of layout, design and materials. Policies HWC2 and C3 of the Castle Morpeth District Local Plan. On the edge of the settlement boundary with clear views from the open landscape adjacent, detrimental effect on the special character of the area, special landscape value and setting of Heading on the Wall. Policy H15 of the Castle Morpeth District Local Plan, the openness of Centurion Way. This loss of openness in congruency with the street scene. 2 park benches which overlook the application site were left by the Mining Institute for all village people to enjoy the stunning Tyne Valley views. The proposal will detrimentally affect residential amenity for all residents and visitors. These views will be lost forever and only enjoyed by a few. The proposed are 2-storey plus pitched roof in height. This is out of character with other developments. The 2 existing dwellings adjacent to the east and west of this application site are both set into the hillside, located down the site and limited in height. The most recent development to the east, the Villa 2001 reference 11/00804, was height restricted based upon ground level at the adjacent property, number 6 Centurion Way. The same principle should be applied here, with maximum heights taken at Centurion Way directly opposite each plot. This proposed development is simply not necessary. The site has numerous historic planning consents for single-storey bungalows, set further down into the site, set into the hillside, roof heights restricted to the level of Centurion Way. The developer seeks to profiteer to the absolute maximum by this application. A site visit or stroll in the area is highly recommended. I request that this application be refused. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Leslie. We also have written representation from a supporter of the application, and that will be read by Ryan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to support this application on behalf of the applicant, Hamilton Willis. Hamilton Willis are a locally based small-scale bespoke developer owned by 2 North East natives and employing North East staff, one of which, Aidan Hamilton, intends to live in one of the proposed new homes with his partner and new baby. The site is located in Heading on the Wall, a village classified in the local plan as a service village, with the proposed classed as infill development. Existing and emerging policy supports infill development within existing settlements, and this proposal clearly meets this vision of delivering high quality homes within settlement boundaries. The site has a long-standing history of residential approvals dating back to 1976, when an application was approved for 3 dwellings, with 4 further applications approved since then. The principle of housing in this location is therefore long established. The proposal is for 4 dwellings only. The designs are single-storey with low-rise roofs at the front and 2-storey at the rear. The design has been carefully considered, utilising the topography of the site and using the slope as a design opportunity to ensure each dwelling is set into the site. This allows the buildings to seamlessly sit into the landscape. The roofs are hipped away at the front and gables to further reduce their size and ensure a diminutive presence in the street scene from Centurion Way. As the committee report states, Headon is a village made up of different architectural styles with no defining theme. These range from the early stone-built units, the large estate developments of the 1950s, 60s and 70s, and a large selection of individually built one-off dwellings, each one different to the last. The applicants have carefully considered the design and materials of the homes to ensure that they positively contribute to the street scene on Centurion Way, using a palette of traditional materials of brick, slate and stone. At every stage, the applicants have worked with the case officer and addressed each point raised during consideration of the proposals. Any design changes asked of them by the council's officers have been made so that there is now comprehensive acceptance from all of the council's consultees. Previous comments from the highways team regarding access and parking have been resolved following cooperation from the applicant and the highways team. The proposal retains public amenity by maintaining views through the development, including from existing public benches, which until recently have been limited by hedging, and by creating large separation between the plots to retain views across the site of the Tyne Valley. The applicant has also agreed with relevant parties to ensure that the approved agricultural building would not be built. This will be controlled by Section 106 agreement signed by the owner of the land where the shed has consent. The approved agricultural building is 75 metres long by 9 metres high and is planned to run along almost the entire boundary of the site. It is a significant benefit to the impact on the appearance of the village if this shed was not to be constructed. To address local resident concerns about destruction during construction, the application includes a construction management plan which carefully considers the route of construction traffic to the site, which will predominantly come from the south through the field. This can be controlled by condition. The site on Centurion Way is a logical location for a small amount of high quality homes, which is in complete accordance with planning policies. To summarise, the proposal includes 4 exceptionally designed homes in a highly sustainable location. The impacts on residents have been carefully considered and have been kept to an absolute minimum. Any concerns raised have been mitigated against by proposing innovative design which fits into the surrounding street scene and landscape. The proposal delivers much needed high quality housing without impacting on the green belt, in line with the aims of the NPPF, the emerging plan and local plan. The proposal perfectly aligns with the policy context of the site, as has been demonstrated in the case officer's report and presentation. The proposal therefore displays all of the desirable elements, qualities and characteristics which underpin good planning and gives the members no justifiable planning reason not to find this application suitable. As the proposal fully accords with all relevant planning policy, we respectfully request that the members should be in a position to approve the application before then. Thank you. That's all, Chair.
Thank you, Ryan. Well, that concludes the written representations, and I can now open this up to members for questions. Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously, I'm the local member for Headon, but actually stayed on the committee because there are questions and aspects of the report that I would like to debate more fully. In terms of actual questions, I think I've got 3. You state in the report that the provisions of the new Northumberland local plan have not been taken into account. Surely the new local plan should be a live document, so I'm not quite sure why it's been dismissed like that.
Got Rob coming in here.
Yeah, Chair, can I come in here?
Yes.
We are approaching this with a completely rigorous approach because the site, and this for me is the key issue, Councillor Jackson, is within the settlement boundary of the settlement, and it is identified in the new local plan as a service village. So therefore, it is to be assumed that this site is anticipated to come forward for housing during the period of the local plan. The point about not placing great weight on the new local plan at the moment is it is just about over the line. This site isn't an area that is contested in that process, but to attach full development plan status, you are safer today in relying on the fact that this is within the settlement boundary of the plan that is currently adopted and in force. Okay.
That's fair enough. Okay, then the second question is the report's quite narrow and it doesn't include the planning history that relates to this site. And you can probably confirm to me, because I haven't had time to look them up, but the previous planning applications that have been approved for this site have been either for 2 or for 3 bungalows, much smaller buildings than are proposed here. Is that correct?
Yes, I'd have checked the history of the site. A lot of the applications are going back into sort of 1970s, where we actually haven't got the information. A lot of the proposals are 2, 3. I think there's actually one for 1 detached property. The plans I have seen the recent plans. I think we're back in, I think it was 90, maybe 90s or 80s. Were for two dwellings, but they were actually lower down. And then they did create a bigger gap in between the 2 properties. I mean, that it's going back quite a while, and there would have been different local plan policies in place. And from the beginning of the process, we did try and seek to try and reduce the density in the height. But I think in accordance with the plans and reports, it's difficult to try and to do that if the policies aren't there to back it up. So
it's been consented previously for either 2 or 3 just smaller bungalow properties, and now here we've got 4 or 5 bedroom properties being
yeah, there were still large bungalows, just the 2, but they were kind of set lower down, but they would still create an impact. I mean, any building on the site would create an impact no matter how big it is. Yeah. In terms of this application, it's
Chair, can I just come in here to clarify a point, which I think is always worth bearing in mind here, in that we need to separate out 2 questions here. And firstly, I'll call it the principle of residential development on this site. And clearly, lots of the tests we are being asked to make about design, etc., and whether they're appropriate or not, are really, really important in situations where you're going outside the settlement boundary and there's a presumption that your starting point is no. Okay, here the presumption is that subject to an appropriate design, that the answer will be yes. Bear in mind that we are looking at the merits of the application in front of us. We are not measuring that merit against other schemes, because there could be either none or an infinite number of schemes on any given site. We are looking at this site, what is tabled in front of us, which is both a reaction to modern design approaches, modern planning process, policies in the MPPF. And I would suggest as well, it is material as well to consider that this is a response to the market in terms of this site, as the developer has looked to balance those issues, which with the development which meets his needs. And I'll say again, to go back to the original point, is that we are not debating really the fact should this site be developed or not. And that actually, unfortunately, although we have to have sympathy for residents who have been used to a site remaining undeveloped for a long period of time, that is not the question. It's about the adequacy of the design here. And I would suggest that in terms of modern design approaches, from the graphics you'll have seen presented by Richard, that this scheme represents, I would respectfully suggest a scheme towards the higher ends of the design quality that we often see in terms of new build compared with some of the applications and indeed built forms in the county, delivered in the last few years.
Okay.
Thank you, Rob. That's very clear. Are you wanting a third question, Councillor Jackson?
I just need to explore, because I actually don't think there's too much detail in the report. The third question relates to the height of the buildings, and then the objectors sort of mentioned this in their letter, in their objection letter. It seems that the height has been set by the height of the neighbouring property, the villa, the maximum roof height. Now there is some idea that actually that building, when it was built, was constructed at a different level to what was consented at the time by some considerable amount. And also there is that relationship with the houses on Centurion Way, and that these buildings should be height restricted much, but at a level much below that. So how have the planning officers resolved the height situation is my question.
Yeah, can I come in here? And maybe Richard will want to. It can be the case in certain locations you may take what we call design cues from existing buildings around a site. Given that there isn't, though, one overriding design principle in the settlement, that as a general approach is probably not appropriate. But I would suggest, though, that these houses are a response to height restrictions on the site, and as explained in both in the presentation and in the report, in terms of the scale and massing of them. What you have to ask yourself is that response so insufficient as it would justify that the harm caused by these proposals outweighs the benefit of delivering housing in an area, remember, I'll restate it, identified for housing both in previous and in the new local plan. Okay. That is very much a question for members, though. I would, though, suggest, though, that what we've seen tabled in front of us is a response to the design cues offered up by the overall built form and topography. Okay, and just to restate, while of course we have sympathy, the right to a view through a site isn't a material consideration, but what is a material consideration is visual impact. In other words, if the buildings were so inappropriate in the location by virtue of the design that they caused a unacceptable visual impact, that would be something that you could potentially base a refusal. However, I think it's reasonable to look at this in terms of the graphics that we used in the presentation, that these aren't egregiously out of scale for the site. And on that basis, I do feel that a refusal on that grounds will be difficult to justify at appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, just to confirm, the ridge height from the street level is approximately 4.5 meters, which is actually quite low. Bungalows you can get up to 5 and beyond for single story, so it is quite a low height from the street. In terms of the actual site levels, there is a condition, it's the last condition 24, which requests sort of site levels to be submitted prior to commencement. So that's just to ensure that the buildings will accord to the plan submitted, and there won't be sort of raised any higher than the deals that are submitted. So that can be obviously looked at by enforcement if there are any issues. But I think with that condition, it does secure that there won't be higher than what's presented now.
Thank you. Does that answer your questions, Councillor Jackson?
Yeah, for the moment. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Can't see anyone. Okay. The recommendation is that this application be granted permission subject to Section 106 and the conditions laid out in the officer's report. Is anyone willing to put a proposal forward? Councillor Jackson has his hand raised.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I still think there are outstanding issues. I mean, officers seem to recognise that there is this question of visual impact.
Sorry, is this a question or are you putting a proposal forward, Councillor Jackson?
I'm going to put a proposal forward, yeah.
Thank you.
And introduce it. I'm actually proposing that this application is actually deferred for a site visit, because this issue about whether it's compatible with the distinctive vernacular character of the locality in policy H15 is crucial to this one. And also in the NPPF that it has to be sympathetic to the local character and history of the surrounding built environment and landscape setting. And I think there's a real issue there. And it's linked with me in my mind about real overdevelopment on the site. It's a really small site, and I think it is perfectly suitable for 2 or 3 smallish bungalows. But to put 4 or 5 bedroom houses on it is way overdevelopment on the site. And I think members just have to have a look at the floor plan that's been presented of where the buildings are going to be. I think some of the visuals that we've seen and been presented to the committee are actually from a misleading perspective, especially the 3D ones. And I think the buildings will have a much greater impact on the local environment than is indicated on there, which is why I think we need a site visit. And then finally, we've got this issue about parking, and we've just been, the issue has just been raised this afternoon, that there might not be sufficient area for parking for 4 5-bedroom houses on that site. So I think there are some real issues, and I think the only way to actually gauge the impact on the local built environment is actually for the committee to go and have a look whenever it's possible.
Right, so your proposal would be to defer this application for a site visit because of concerns about the impact that we can't see from these photos and because of the parking? Would that read right?
Well, and also to judge whether 4 5-bedroom houses would be overdevelopment on what is a small site.
Okay, you would need a seconder for that.
Thanks, Chair. I'd be happy to second that. I am tending towards thinking that probably the proposals are acceptable, but I would like to see it on site if practical. And I see no reason with the way that restrictions are being lifted that couldn't be achieved within a month or 2 at the very most.
Okay, thank you. Well, that has been proposed by Councillor Jackson and seconded by Councillor Wearmouth. So if anybody wants to come in and debate that proposal. Councillor Dickinson.
Well, I don't particularly want to debate the proposal. I just thought this one was quite straightforward. The officer report seemed quite clear. The examples of the property seemed quite clear. The head of planning's just said that the last local plan and this local plan identified those areas for housing and development. So I'm just not sure, other than what we get out of a site visit for what, there was quite a comprehensive view. I know the local member feels that that's a distorted view from a photograph point of view, but then, we've been dealing with lots of applications recently with this type of arrangement, and I just, based on view and parking, the kind of items that I don't know whether a deferral's a reasonable thing for this, based on what the planning officers and others have said. I don't know, I'm still thinking it through, but that's just comments from me, Chair, really.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. I've got Rob Murphy wanting to come in.
Yeah, can I just offer some thoughts here? And actually, when Councillor Jackson presented his follow-on comments, I think it became clearer to his concerns was coming from. Can we separate out in our minds the design of the houses from, I think what Peter is getting at is that there's overdevelopment of the site, and there are too many and they are too close to each other, and that doesn't fit in with the pattern and density of the settlement. Because my advice to you would be that I think the design of the houses in themselves is strong, okay, but you may have an argument to make, if you so wish to, that there are simply too many on the site, and that you could probably best get from looking at it on the site. I would say though that it isn't a site where we would have normally have set out in advance in terms of our pre-application advice, etc., a density limit, because I think sometimes if you, I would prefer to see more but better designed houses rather than poorer quality design ones on a lower density. So I think there's a balance to be made here, but it is something which is worth looking at. And what we can do, if this is the best way to resolve this one, is to organise a site visit as quickly as possible, because COVID restrictions wouldn't necessarily be a problem on this, because it doesn't involve going into any buildings, and I would suggest there's no need to go to the site itself, and members could meet with a case officer by travelling there separately to look at the site from the public realm. Okay, just to bookend this, the reason why we added on the additional condition isn't so much concerns about will the parking fit in. It's that my new highways development manager is always looking to secure parking arrangements that work properly, and there was some concern that actually the precise layout for parking needed to be amended. So at this late stage, we just put on the condition where details will be submitted. We think that parking can be probably accommodated on the site, so that we want to be to have more surety that the actual detailed design works properly. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. Anyone else want to come in on this? Councillor Dickinson.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to ask a really simple question. Well, I thought it was simple, because Rob's confused me, because it's kind of almost an about turn, Rob, on what you were saying before.
No.
So we're talking about an area of land identified for development that previously we shouldn't, and we wouldn't usually, as you quoting you, wouldn't look at density of property, etc., on that piece of land. But now we're saying we should, and we should.
No. What I'm saying is that the design of the houses we found acceptable. Clearly, the report also considers that the density is acceptable. However, clearly, I think this is a logical position that there is, like, it wouldn't be an endless opportunity for for increased density. And as the office perception is that it hasn't reached the stage where it's unacceptable. However, members may feel for the site in terms of relationship that it's reached a stage that it does represent overdevelopment. Again, I would have struggled to I think argue that one at appeal. However, I think it's probably the right thing to do in terms of responding to residents' concerns in a transparent way, for members to go out on site and to assure themselves and to check that the arguments presented within the committee reports are correct. Okay, it's the point I'm making, Scott, is that overdevelopment of this site is something which you could argue. Okay, and it's the edge of the settlement, and you could take the view that you would prefer to see decreasing density as you got towards the edge of the settlement, for example. It's not something which has been set out in a design guide or in policy, but it is within the realms of decisions that you could make. Okay?
So just to be clear then, so, and I don't want to prolong it, but so we could prefer something else, but we're regularly told to deal with what's in front of us. And you're now saying that it would be logical to go and have a look, even though the case officer says, let me finish, Rob. Let the case officer says it's acceptable, it fits with the plan, it fits with the previous plan, it fits, just see what I mean?
Yeah, I can. What I was saying, the reason why I was trying to steer you away from saying the design of the houses wasn't acceptable. You could say that, like the site, okay, the site is suitable for housing. No one is disagreeing with that, even though, you know, some of the residents may not like it, okay. And clearly is that the officer interpretation is that the density proposed is acceptable. Clearly, there has to be, on a semi-rural location like this, a ceiling to how dense you'd go, okay, to retain character. And what the committee is saying is they feel that that density on the site constitutes overdevelopment, and they would think it potentially could be unacceptable for that reason. Okay, I'm not saying I agree with that interpretation, but I'm saying it is a view that members could come to, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything they want to say about this? I've got to say personally, I was quite happy to go ahead with this. I'm sort of aware that we've dealt with quite a few applications under this delegated responsibility and on these virtual meetings. But we do have a proposal in that it is deferred for a site visit. It's been proposed by Councillor Jackson and seconded by Councillor Wearmouth. So, Danielle.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'll just go through if everyone can let me know if you're for, against or abstaining for the recommendation for deferral. Councillor Dickinson.
Against.
Councillor Dodd.
For.
Councillor Dunn.
Against.
Councillor Foster.
Abstain.
Councillor Jackson.
For.
Councillor Sanderson.
For.
And Councillor Wearmouth.
For.
That's 4 for the motion, 2 against and 1 abstention, Chair.
Thank you. That motion is therefore carried, and this application will be deferred for a site visit to be arranged as soon as possible, I would think. Is that okay, Rob?
Could I just add, by then as well, to respond to one of Peter's other comments, that will give us time to have a revised parking layout submitted and put to our highways development management team to review.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, that's the end of the actual planning applications. If we move on to the next agenda item, and that's the appeals update. Members have been given the monthly report, which details the progress of any planning appeals. And unless there's any specific questions, I'll just ask if we can agree to receive and note the report. If everyone's agreed. Yeah, that's fine. And I'm not aware of any urgent business. No. So that brings this meeting to a close, really. All that's left to do is thank members for their participation, and not just for this one, but for all the meetings we've had over the last couple of years for the Morpeth, the Castle Morpeth LAC. So thank you very much. And if we can end the live feed, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.